Looking for reliable forex analysis? Check out ForexScope for daily forecasts and insights to help you trade smarter. Link in the description and comments.
The United Kingdom is reportedly exploring a stringent asylum model, drawing inspiration from Denmark's controversial approach. A move that raises significant questions about the practicalities and ethical implications of such a policy. For over a decade, Denmark has implemented a series of measures aimed at deterring asylum seekers, with the precariousness of refugees' legal status frequently highlighted as the cornerstone of its strategy. Prior to 2015, individuals granted refuge in Denmark could anticipate their residency permits to become permanent within 5 to 7 years. However, a decade ago, amidst a surge of over 1 million people seeking refuge in Europe fleeing conflict and persecution, predominantly from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Eritrea, Denmark radically overhauled its immigration laws. This shift saw temporary residence permits issued for limited periods, typically 1 to 2 years, with no assurance of eventual permanent residency. The criteria for attaining permanent status became notably demanding, requiring refugees to achieve fluency in Danish and demonstrate several years of full-time employment. Michaela Klantee-Bendixen, who leads the refugee advocacy group Refugees Welcome Denmark and serves as Denmark's country coordinator for the European Commission's Migrant Integration Hub, aptly described the psychological impact of this policy, stating, "It's about the attitude and feeling of being here as a visitor on a temporary basis. You don't know where your future is going to be." She further illustrated the severe implications, noting, "Even a speeding ticket can push that permanent stay many years into the future." Denmark's immigration policies have recently resurfaced in the spotlight due to reports that the UK's Labour Party is considering adopting a similar framework to make the United Kingdom a less appealing destination for asylum seekers. Despite facing considerable criticism from the United Nations and various human rights organizations, these restrictions, among the most severe in Europe, appear to have yielded the desired outcomes for policymakers. Asylum arrivals in Denmark, which stood at 14,792 in 2014, with significant numbers originating from Syria and Eritrea, plummeted to 2,099 by 2021, and reached 2,333 in 2024. Of the nearly 100,000 residence permits granted in Denmark last year, a mere 1% were allocated to refugees. The remaining 99% encompassed a diverse group, including 9,623 Ukrainian refugees, who are categorized separately: migrants from other European Economic Area countries, individuals reuniting with family, and those holding work and study permits. However, critics contend that this reduction in arrivals has come at a significant cost to Denmark's international standing and its core values. The integration of populist right-wing ideologies into the policies of ostensibly center-left governments, they argue, has eroded some of the fundamental principles for which Denmark is globally recognized. Rune Lykeberg, editor-in-chief of the newspaper Information, expressed concern, stating, "The argument against it is that you get extremism in the center, you have no strong position from which you can legitimize human rights and protection of minorities." Upon her ascent to power in 2019, Denmark's Social Democratic Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, who unseated the center-right government amidst a decline in support for the far-right Danish People's Party and the Liberal Alliance, pledged to reduce the number of asylum seekers in Denmark to 0. This objective was set in motion by her predecessor, Lars Løkke Rasmussen, then leader of the center-right Venstre Party and now the current foreign minister. The pivotal 2015 policy shift towards temporary residence permits occurred under his leadership, as did the paradigm shift of 2019, a suite of regulations that redirected official focus and rhetoric from integration towards repatriation. 6 years later, Frederiksen remains in office, leading a center-left government that has strategically leveraged an uncompromising stance on migration, reinforcing the notion that Denmark is an unwelcoming environment for refugees. Bendixen observed, "What Denmark has been doing is a policy of deterrence, scaring people from choosing Denmark." While Denmark has consistently faced international scrutiny from the UN High Commissioner for Refugees regarding its asylum practices, many of its integration policies have also drawn widespread criticism. Perhaps the most contentious is the legislation targeting ghettoes, now termed parallel societies, which empowers the state to demolish apartment complexes in areas where at least half of the residents possess a non-Western background. In February, a senior advisor to the EU's highest court concluded that this law constitutes direct discrimination based on ethnic origin. Despite such condemnation, the political discourse remains largely unaffected. In fact, recent domestic debates have intensified, with the far-right Danish People's Party, though not in government, witnessing a surge in support and advocating for remigration, the mass deportation of individuals with immigrant backgrounds residing in Denmark. Eva Singer, director of Asylum and Refugee Rights at the Danish Refugee Council, contends that it is politicians, rather than the general public, who are driving anti-immigrant sentiment, stating, "The politicians say they follow the popular mood, but maybe the popular mood is coming from what the politicians are saying, which is not based on fact." The upcoming general elections next year may offer insight into the enduring popularity of the Social Democrats' approach, with immigration poised to be a significant issue among others, including former Danish colony Greenland's relationship with the UK following Donald Trump's pronouncements, corporate upheavals, and the threat of hybrid warfare from Russia. Lyckeberg suggests that the Social Democrats' immigration strategy aligns with a long-standing Danish political playbook spanning over half a century. He explained, "The politics of it is part of what you could call the Danish model. You don't try to burn the so-called populists. You try to steal their fire. You keep the so-called extremists from the center of power and thus defend the old political order." Critics point out that the practical implementation of the government's stringent policies often leads to contradictions. Singer highlighted the frustration experienced by municipalities, stating, "We hear from municipalities it is quite frustrating that, on one hand, they have to tell refugees everything they need to do to integrate and at the same time have to remind them how temporary this is. They run counter to each other." Dixon further elaborated on the detrimental impact of temporary refugee status, calling it poison for integration as it impedes individuals' ability to adapt their language skills, advance their careers, and establish stable lives in a new country. Martin Lidegaard, leader of the Social Liberal Party and former Danish foreign minister, believes certain aspects of Denmark's integration policies, such as facilitating access to education and employment to ensure new arrivals become a full member of Danish society, are worthy of emulation. However, he admitted, "Other parts of our politics I am not so proud of." Lidegaard emphasized that as European populations age and fertility rates decline, countries including the UK face a critical demographic challenge, a growing labor shortage. He asserted, "We lack labor. We lack people. Because we get fewer children. Our fertility is declining. Our economy and our labor market desperately needs some immigration." On the other hand, it is clear we have populist right-wing parties who want to fight against it and people coming to countries with different ethnic backgrounds. He concluded that all nations must carefully navigate this complex issue, stating, "All of us need to balance this in a clever way. No one can afford to walk into the future without labor." The Danish Ministry of Immigration and Integration declined to provide comment on these matters.